Evening all on PlayChess and YouTube, streaming to YouTube. Okay, the British Chess Championship is well underway, actually approaching its final rounds, and it has had some very exciting games which I've been following. It's been played in Aberystwyth in Wales, and yeah, quite a few British Grandmasters are competing. So let's have a look at some of the more interesting games. I have been peeking at the live commentary during the last few days. Rather, not the live commentary, the live boards, which are available for most boards actually. It's really good. You can see, you know, even the lower boards live. So one of the slight surprises of the tournament is Jonathan Hawkins, an international master, leading throughout the event and still leading up till today. He had a phenomenal number of games. Let's have a look at how he's playing some of his games first. So this game here is in round 2 that I'd like to show you. He played the French defence against the Harrier Ravi at 22:02. So Hawkins is 2-5-1-6. He plays the French defence, and we see d4, d5, and the Tarrasch variation. And Hawkins elects for this very active move c5. White plays knight gf3, and we see c takes, knight c6, bishop b5, bishop d7, unpinning. Now white plays knight takes c6, b takes c6, so black is getting an extra pawn towards the centre. Let's put on actually a kibitzer here. I think stockfish, that would be really cool to use. Okay, and already I think black technically might be more than equal here in this position. Bishop d3, bishop d6, white castles, queen c7, looking at h2 now. White plays g3, then we see knight f6, and now quite a committal move, looking move, f4. Okay, clearly white's threatening something like this, but at the moment there's a check. It's not really a major thing, but even so it might gain space, and black stops that space gain with e5. And also, of course, he's opening up this bishop here. White played f takes, opening up the rook. That might be useful, but look at this structure. It seems a bit weakened around white's king. E takes d5 is played, and instead of recapturing here, we see a different move, bishop h3, looking at the rook. And here, yeah, white's already in some difficulties in this position. We see rook e1, and black now castles. White dare not take on c6. Look at that g2 square, it looks too dangerous. If white takes, in fact, even stronger than this is not actually very good. Queen f3, but even stronger here, crushing, might be knight g4, with the idea of check here. So white's got to be careful in this position, and plays actually knight c4. Black is still doing well, check, bishop e3, takes on e3, takes on d5. Okay, you might think, well, this is an isolated pawn, but white's king seems a bit vulnerable. There's only 2 pawns there, there's a bit of a vacuum there. Bishop f5, and that's actually taken. Knight takes, rook a b8, looking at b2. So okay, isolated pawn but weakened king, so black's king seems a bit safer. We see b3, check, and king g2. Now just rook fe8, just challenging that e-file. Okay, queen d2. And this actually gives black a very, very good position, this queen d2. This next forcing move, knight e4, is played. And yeah, because they're looking at f2 here, and there's pressure on c2, and it's actually quite tricky. For example, if, let's have a look at queen e2, then d4 here looks good. This looks pretty nasty. Looking at the knight, it looks pretty nasty. So say like this, it starts to get nasty. So basically white decided here to give up the c2 pawn, looking at mating, but giving up the c2 pawn. That's taken. King g1. Black defends now with knight f6, and it looks as though this is underminable with knight h6. So black doesn't really want to take here, although it is possible. But black plays a stronger move here. Doesn't want to go here because the knight takes f7. Plays here, and we see check and a check here. But rook e7 is strong. It's a good move here. If white tries to carry on the checks, then knight e8. That's fine. White's attack is repulsed. So this is a bad situation now. White actually played rook e1, and we have now knight e4 looking at f2, and white is significantly worse here, but best is probably to try checking, like check here, check, and this, you know, would need to be played, I think. And of course black is doing well, but there's still a little bit of a game to play. But in the game we see actually white playing knight g8, a little outrageous looking, to win the exchange, but this is totally refuted now. Can you, I wonder if any of you can see how. Well, I'll get you to the position. The final move, check, was played, and in this position, what would you play with black? And this is a good test if anyone's awake actually. So black to play here. What would you play with black in this position if I gave you 20 seconds starting from now? Any ideas? So black to play here. Neatly refutes white's cheeky knight g8 actually. So what would you play? Anyone? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I'm glad someone's guessed it. Knight g3. Knight takes g3. Yeah. Tactical way. Has a tactical way. So this opens up the e file. So it's hopeless now. We can just take here. So knight takes g3, the final move. So okay, let's see what happens later. A much stronger opponent next we're going to look at for Hawkins, just to get a gist really of his style of play. Now his opponent now, I want to show you, this is in round 4, is Justin Tanner, 2-3-7-5, playing white. And actually Jonathan Hawkins doesn't play the French defence against Justin Tanner. Maybe he's adapting or keeping his repertoire a non-fixed target for preparation. He plays actually e5, which has got masses of different variations, of course, and we get this Roy Lopez, and we get actually unusual, quite unusual variation. I'm going to connect some live, but this is about the 5th, 6th down, knight ge7. So this is very interesting, knight ge7, and we see now white classically trying to build the center. a6, d6, bishop d7, unpinning. Now it's knight g6, bishop e7, and white closes the position. I'll generally welcome this. It looks a little bit King's Engine-y after closing the position. Black can often play for f5 in principle. Knight b8, white takes on d7, knight takes, plays c4, so it is looking a little bit like King's Engine structure, except this bishop isn't fianchettoed. This knight's on g6. Black castled, but we do get this f5 now. E takes, rook takes, and white plays knight e4, knight f4. So if black can get time to build up here, this might be an idea to go here, looking at g2. g3, the knight goes back, king g2. And actually we see queen f8 now, putting a bit more pressure on f3, tying down the queen a little bit. Knight f g5. Looking at the e6 square, so this actually is eliminated. Bishop takes, knight takes. And black prepares to challenge the knight on e6 with this next move, queen f6. So this becomes possible to challenge e6 soon. Or with the other knight. In fact, the d knight is used, offering the c7 pawn. So that's actually quite interesting, but it's fine. It's fine. After knight takes, rook c8. The pawn is being won back. Knight takes, queen takes. So black is actually, after this, according to engine evaluation, black is actually more than equal here. So was this all a big mistake? Just rewind. Hold on a sec. This was comfortable for white. In fact, instead of going in here, it's recommended just to go on e4. Actually, I'm reminded in King's Engine type positions, there was a kind of thing every Russian schoolboy knows, that in the King's Engine, the knight on e4 is really good. It's usually blocking in the bishop though. But here, it is in front of that pawn. It's difficult, once black's committed to lose the f pawn, it's difficult to dislodge that. This will look like a nice advantage for white. I don't know what you guys think of that. That seems to be a bit of a crazy thing that white's elected to do, this whole thing with knight e6. I'm hoping, well, do you agree that the knight should have just gone back here to e4? What's the matter with this position? In fact, it's adding solidity to f2 as well, even if black trebled. So yeah, in the game continuation, it seems that black is doing fine here, more than fine, and now plays e4, which gives this knight a menacing route here to f3 as well. You see, if the knight had been perched there, it would have stopped this e4 business, this naughty stuff, which is now happening. e4, knight e5 to f3, it gets even more naughty soon. It seems white can try and interrupt this, knight e5 to f3, with queen d4, looking at e4. Okay, so at the moment we definitely can't take that. Just check this variation. That'll be fine. But what about these light squares? Rook h5, looking at queen h5 mating, queen h3 mating. So this looks as though it's gone completely berserk. This counterplay shouldn't have happened, basically. White should have sat on that position. And even worse now, we see rook h1, a miserable rook stuck on h1. Black reinforces that e-pawn now. Queen takes d6, yes, this is offered. It's gained a bit of time for an attack. Black wants to play something like something quite dangerous, like knight h4, given the chance. At the moment, the bishop's controlling g5. This next move, king h8, no, even better than this, is just this one to here. Now, if this was played immediately, knight e5, I think there's a snag with it. Can you spot the snag, which explains why in this position This is the ideal, but King H8 is played. So I'm hoping you can guess why King H8 was played, because if we played Knight E5 here, what would you play as white in this position? It ruins everything. So if this had occurred, what would you play here with white in this position? Any ideas? Just to see if you're awake. It's not. So knight f3 is threatened. I'm hoping you'll get it. White actually avoids disaster totally and actually ends up better here. Quite delay actually. 20 seconds. So what? White's playing here. Yeah, so this kind of thing shows that you need sometimes this here. We'll just get rid of knight f3, and there's nothing really to speak of there. So King h8 prepares this vicious knight e5 to here, and also of course the rook's holding d5 at the moment as well, but the pawn is protected. This rook, white is playing like a rook down with this silly rook now on h1. And this is a really crushing position. This is now +3 for black. Bishop d4 is played. Is there any particular cheapo this might set up? Well, queen c7. But it also stops knight e5. If knight e5, we can just snap that off and white would be okay. But now, instead here, we see this is actually now if we look at this is interesting. It's very interesting. You see bishop d4, and I can ask you what is the most accurate move in the position based on weakness of the last move, actually, of bishop d4. What would you say now is a mega accurate move in this position for black to apply to bishop d4 if you were playing black? And I told you, clue, weakness of the last move. What would you play with black? Here. It's like some, when bishop d4 is played, it adds weight to e5, but it loses weight pressure on other key squares. Okay, so has it been suggested for... Yeah? Not knight h... I don't think knight h4 works. If knight h4, white can actually take here and it's stopping here. And if here, then bishop e5, and actually this is... No, sorry, not bishop e5. It can be taken. Queen d7 apparently is sufficient. Queen d7. If check, king f1, there's no attack. But no, not knight h4, but actually that bishop come off g5, rook g5. So pinning that pawn now introduces knight h4 here for knight f3. That's the principal threat, rook g5. White is in big trouble here. You know white's in big trouble because the engine is suggesting giving up the queen as well as this one as the best moves, which is not very nice. What does white do? White's playing a rook down, and yeah, I mean d7's covered from here. I mean it's terrible. White tries this ridiculous move and then plays check here. Doesn't really help. King h6. So there's still knight h4 on the cards. rook d1, knight h4, and white resigned here. It didn't bother with this one. I think just rook g6, and because of that pin, this is not on. We just take here. So yeah, just white had to resign here. So basically, it seemed to go totally pear-shaped, this game. At this, I mean, we can identify the exact points just from engine point of view as well. So knight e4, as every Russian schoolboy knows, in the king's engine, but it sort of blockades like this pawn. It takes out the dynamism of black's position, really. So it's an important positional consideration to try and blockade. Yeah, once this e4 happened, then we saw this. It all just went terrible. You could say that white may have found it lucrative to open up d-file pressure and win the d6 pawn, and that's all what happened. If we look, white did open up that d-file at this, if we look, because he took away also the support of the d6 pawn, so that's fine. He got some d pawn pressure, but because black played very resourcefully here in this position, you know, this is pretty nasty stuff in principle. All this stuff, it's pretty nasty. It doesn't matter about the d6 pawn. It's a temporary, it's a backward pawn concession which white's generated from his play instead of blockading, but it's not enough to counterbalance this attack. You might think, well, h4, I think this could have been beaten with knight takes h4, so white's king would have been beaten up. So it's already pretty critical here in this position. If white didn't take the pawn, I don't think it matters now. This is just too dangerous. It's actually seems lost, this position. I mean, white is actually a rook down. So a nice attacking game there from black. Given a bit of play, he used that. Okay, so let's have a look at another game of Jonathan Hawkins, now against the Grandmaster opponent. So people are wondering what would happen when he starts playing the GMs. So Simon Williams as white. This is in round 6 against Jonathan Hawkins. Simon Williams is still lower rated though as a GM, 2462. Jonathan Hawkins is a very strong IM rating, 2516. And we see this King's Engine defense. And I'm really amazed actually that not only we have Jonathan Hawkins playing the King's Engine defense, we have Mark Hebden, who I want to show you some games later, playing the King's Engine defense and sometimes doing well with it. It's amazing that, you know, to think that's great. Not everyone has been lobotomized to play the Slav defense. People are actually playing interesting openings with black. That's brilliant to see King's Engine defenses being played. So so e4 d6, but well, white has a wealth of choices here. So white plays bishop d3, and we have a, you know, an interesting rich position. Yeah, so white's given that you know, space in the center, occupation. Black hopes to destroy white's center later, sometimes. So castles, knight ge2. Now we see knight c6, putting pressure on d4. White castles. Now knight d7, more pressure on d4. Interesting. Bishop e3, e5. So encouraging d5. And then we see knight d4. I don't think white really is keen on taking on d4, giving up a dark square bishop. I don't think this, for example, would be particularly good, this position. Black can actually, it seems black has enough compensation here. Well, the bishop's amazing anyway. You don't want to give this unchallenged bishop. If white tries to win a pawn, c5, and black's got a good compensation surely. Well, there's going to be pressure down b2 coordinating, and maybe even on c4. So actually white tried to play positionally here, ignore that, and played bishop c2, and that bishop was actually, well, it does mean that this is on the cards now. Knight d4. So the knight took the bishop. Queen takes. f5. Okay, so f5, and yeah, so with this sort of squish plan of f4 and maybe f3, so white decides committally to play e takes f5, and that really is interesting strategically, tactically, and everything. This decision here, this structural change here. If we have a look at f3, you'd think this is a sort of dream attack maybe here for a King's Indian player. Maybe this sort of thing. And it can get dangerous, you'd think. So actually white tries to avoid all of that stuff. So he plays e takes f5, and also now fixes down the f5 pawn to try and make this bishop look silly, blocked in. Knight f6, h3 is played. Interesting, h3. Well, knight g4 is actually on the cards here. So, but it seems from an engine perspective, black is doing fine. In fact, more than just equal. Black is on the verge of a tiny advantage here. Black played knight h5. And you see this wonderful bishop with e4 on the cards, and also the queen can even come here potentially. And this g-file, you have the hallmarks of an amazing g-file attack potentially. So rook f3, bishop d7, rook a f1, as though there might be some problem with f5 in the future, but it's encouraging e4, which gives white the d4 square, of course. But does it matter? So white uses that d4 square, but black's building up now systematically on the g-file. And also queen here, looking at this, once this is looking down there. Knight d1, looking at knight e3, which looks nice positional stuff, blockade. But I think white looks in passive actually here, even though he's even pinning the rook, because look at the rooks, they can easily double against the target. And queen takes h3 is not threatened at the moment. Queen takes there and takes. But in principle, it could be dangerous to do that. Knight e3. Rook ag8. Threatening now queen takes h3. So without any takes, because there's takes keeping the pin. So white now has to do something against queen takes h3. He plays king h1. Black, technically, from an engine perspective, is better actually. I don't know. I shouldn't have told you that. I was going to ask, what do you think? Do you think black's better if I polled this here? Do you think black is better in this position, or would you like white? Do you think white's got great potential for damaging black's pawn structure or something? What do you think? Who do you think's better here? If I asked. Do you know? I mean, not know, but who would you say? Who would you play as? Would you prefer to play as black or white? Well, while I'm waiting for those answers, I hope maybe we can go on from here. Or anyway, it seems c5 is the major strategic issue. White's not really threatening, I think, to take here, or is he? Maybe he is. Black did actually, yeah, maybe did respect this threat. Queen takes a7. If this can be got away with, maybe it's possible. Let's just check this. Let's just check this. Say black played h6. Actually, the engine does suggest this is possible. And just coming back here. If we try and let's just try and smash white up with rook takes. I don't think this works. Rook takes check. Just here, there's nothing. The knight holds g2. There's nothing. So yeah, okay, so b6 was played. After king h1, this was respected, b6. Actually, I've been looking at a lot of Boris Spassky games earlier in the day, and it's amazing. Some of Boris Spassky's boldest moves seem to totally ignore the opponent's threats. That's really amazing stuff. It's and believe it or not, you know, 12 years before the Fischer-Spassky match, he seemed to be the strongest, most aggressive Russian grandmaster, and 12 years after the Fischer-Spassky match, he seemed to be dominating a lot of the USSR events. It's amazing. But a lot of Spassky games, he just ignores the opponent's threats. It's like, it's a fundamental basis for his play. But here, yeah, b6 was played. So anyway, white carries on strategically with b4. And now we see a6, a4. And black really doesn't want this pin anymore on the rook. So it plays h6 to just move the king to unpin. c5. We have takes. And now, okay, an interesting decision point. You see white's got these two options, either c6 or cd. Now, for d takes was played. It's a very interesting judgment here, leaving this backward pawn. But, you know, say we did play king h7. Is this so bad? The engine suggests c6 might be a little bit stronger, so we squash the bishop. This is a bad piece. Is this so bad? a5. Are the endings better for white or something? It looks to be about equal anyway. But black kept things open here and the bishop kind of alive, basically, by playing d takes c5. So a lesser evil of accepting that pawn as a potential target. So protects the pawn. But the bishop, you know, has got opportunities later if it's not stopped with a5 soon. We see queen d4, king h7, and actually queen e5 threatens down knight takes f5, rook f7, queen c3. White's really quite passive still, but what is black up to in particular? What can black be up to here? So there's always this f5 point. So if ever the rooks go back, and we just play queen e5. So what black does here is play rook g6 to be able to double like this on g2, and then be able to play rook f6 if needed, or knight, and then knight g3 later. To try and get rid of the defensive piece. So we see a5 fixing down the bishop, rook fg7, but it's more advanced now than this. This is really interesting what happens here. Queen e5, as though saying, you know, get a rook back, but black refuses, ignores that threat basically. Black plays now knight g3 check. So after knight takes g3, rook takes g3. This cannot be taken, surely. This cannot be taken. It's not. White played rook e2. Let's have a look. If knight takes f5, can you see what black would do here? What would black play in this position if knight takes f5 was played? Any ideas? What about queen h3? Why queen h3? This just loses. We can just play rook h2 here. No. Rook takes h3. So we have queen takes f1. Yeah. Rook takes h3. And if king here, we've got rook h1. So yeah, white's not tied down to the... white can't take this, so he meekly protects the knight. And now black evicts the queen with rook e7. Queen d4. And actually at move 36 here, the engine suggests this position is nearly equal. We see bishop d7. And now the bishop, you see that bishop wasn't squashed. It's actually got maybe bishop b5 in mind soon. At some point. We see rook c1. This is given as a mistake by the engines, actually, rook c1. Looking at that c7 pawn. Yeah, because actually he's neglected f4 by doing this. So queen takes f4, very committal stuff. And it kind of protects c7 as well. So I don't know if you can call this a blunder. It doesn't seem clear what white's intention is here, if that was intentional. So d6, I guess, I mean, it's not even threatening too much here. This is just taken. Rook c7. So white's just lost quite quickly, basically 2 pawns on the trot. Are there any threats in sight? Well, maybe if knight d5 didn't have queen f1, that would almost be dangerous. If we can just, I can't even give black a move to demonstrate that. I mean, let's imagine h5 was played here, knight d5, check. If here, then here. Yeah, so, but anyway, black plays this, okay, with the intention of just maybe trebling and then f4 to crash through on g2. We see this strange looking move, queen a7, trying to get things off. But now we reach the position on a recent video of mine. Black really plays a beautiful move in this position, just at move 40. So the time control. Does anyone remember this? What is? I can't test you on this. This is too much. But queen e5 was played, so offering the bishop. Rook takes d7. I don't know how many of you have seen that recent video on the channel. But after queen a1 check, white was forced to resign. So, do you know why white resigned here? If I play king h2, what would you play here? With black, it's actually yeah, totally winning move now. So, what would you play here with black in this position? I'm sure a few of you have seen the recent video, surely, on the channel, kingscrusher channel. So black to play and win here. Black would play rook takes h3. Mate in 2. If takes, then queen h1, checkmate. And if takes here, that opens up that g1 coordination. So actually just queen g1, mate. funny enough, black can even win with throwing in a check. White's helpless here as well. This is still winning. This is helpless. Here we can go here. Anyway, but yeah. So Hawkins with black seems pretty vicious. You know, it was a pretty vicious game. And yeah, I just think this G file looked really good actually throughout the game. It seems White was on the back foot defensively. This is a curious decision. So do you allow yourself to be squished, or do you give yourself a backward pawn? It doesn't look like pleasant choices here. You don't really want a backward pawn on an open file, but on the other hand, it keeps the bishop alive a little bit longer, and it's also bait. And also, if you've got pressure on f4, it's bait, as it provoked the kind of mistake to attack the pawn later. These logical ideas flow from that backward pawn, but they're not always brilliant. They've got downsides. So let's have a look at another game. This is a beautiful game from someone who's actually playing on my correspondence server as well. He's an international master with a very low rating, Jack Rudd, who's been playing on my chess sites, chessworld.net, which I hope you've all given a go on as well. So Jack Rudd, 2278, one of the most underrated, most dramatic movers, I think. He moves so quickly sometimes. He's playing against Faral, 2433, and this is a beautiful game. I mean, I've got to say. So d4 e6, we see c4, check, knight c3. White is not terrified about the quick f5 and knight f6 here. It's probably no big deal. Black played c5, a3, so the double pawn strengthened White's centre, but of course the c4 pawn is a target later, generally. e3, d6, bishop d3. Note we've got this a2 square. Look at this. This a2 square, I've used it in blitz games myself. Watch out for that. Knight b6, f4, f5, knight f3, black castles, h3, really crude stuff, as though this diagonal needs blasting open, as well as that g file. Why not? So b6, looking at that c4 statically. Yeah, g4, knight a5, rook g1. Yeah, why bother castling? This rook is needed on the g file. Okay, so queen e8. And we see this beautiful move. I just think this is great. Rook a2. Just get a double rooks quickly for g takes f5. Amazing. And who cares about c4? Bishop a6. It needs to be given up to give White time to do this g-file stuff. So rook ag2. So immediately threatening g takes and on g7. So g6. Knight g5, looking at e6. Black actually, technically, yeah, black played bishop takes c4 here. Interesting. So there's an interesting idea going on here about this e6 pawn, as though it's can be taken. Bishop takes, knight takes. But surely this would just backfire on White's king here if knight takes e6. It wasn't played. If knight takes e6, black has a very good move in this position, which is really nasty. Or there's another one which is quite nasty, knight d5. It just looks, you don't want to do this, basically. G takes here, rook takes, it's still bad. But there's an even nastier move. The engine suggests knight takes e3. So if takes knight d5, it's just, yeah, the king of the center, you don't want to do this. This isn't the idea. The idea now, queen e2, looking at the knight, b5. Now h4, looking at this structure, we want to undermine this structure. That's what we really want to do. Break down this pawn chain here. Rook f6, h5, undermining the pawn chain. This is poetry, this game. I can't express it. You know, white is breaking all these rules, but you know, we see beautiful games in the past that echo this idea of giving up c4 for a bit of time. And forget about the e6 pawn. That's a shield for white's king. White just wants to undermine the pawn chain. C takes d4, h takes, rook takes. And actually this is given as a blunder now. The engine suggests this was about equal. No, actually it's changing its mind. The engine doesn't like black's position at all. Rook takes g6. G takes f5, E takes, and actually this gives the queen that nice square, queen h5, looking at h7, rook g7, looking at the queen, and fantastic move here. This is the top move in the position, really. Oh, this is fantastic. What does white play in this position? Really, this is amazing. So white's play here, I give you 20 seconds starting from now. What would you play here with white? It's a crushing move. The engine gives us as the very strongest move in the position. Will anyone guess it? Actually, I'm not sure anyone's going to guess it. It's looking like outrageous. Oh. No, it's not queen takes h7. I think black just takes that. There's nothing there. Takes. It's not really. Sorry, not. Pardon me. Sorry. Let's be a bit more careful. Takes. In this position, black can play queen g6, and is not getting mated, and is actually material up. Yeah, I managed to get mated there. No, black just plays queen g6 here, or king f7. Even better, and the king can actually escape. No. There's a move which is beautiful though. Not for that. No. What does white play here? I don't think knight f7. Let's have a quick look at knight f7. Apparently rook g6 is sufficient. This is equal apparently. Rook g6. Right, I'm going to have to give you a clue because you're looking at the position the wrong way, and I've probably given you bad expectations of forcing moves all the time. I'm going to try and give you a clue here because I'd really like someone to guess this move. White ideally, well, the queen's attacked, which is an inconvenience, but white ideally wants to land knight e6 in principle to intensify pressure on g7. So, and it's a queen move, so I'm going to it's a queen move by white. Well, here. So black's just played this, hitting the queen. Where would you move the queen to try and make knight e6 as painful as possible the next time you have a move? Knight e6 immediately doesn't, I don't think does anything. Let's just check this. Just take, and it's hopeless. Just there's nothing. So what does white play in this position? You're saying queen h6, queen h6. Now actually this is one of the better moves suggested by the engine, and white would be better here, and it does actually support knight e6 and knight takes h7. But there's so give yourself a few points for queen h6, but there's something even stronger than queen h6, which is aesthetically pleasing as well. Something technically stronger than queen h6. I shouldn't wait too long for this. I don't think anyone's going to get it. Basically, it's a queen move. It's not queen h6. It's not queen f3. Although you might be getting warmer with queen f3. You're getting a little bit warmer with queen f3 because it's nice to be on this diagonal, isn't it? Potentially. Yes, someone got it. I'm going to have to say queen h1. Queen h1. We're looking at down at the diagonal. We're looking at knight e6. We're protecting the rook. Yes, I think, now hang on, queen f3, you might think, well, you might think did the same thing. Black has actually here queen c6, apparently. Queen c6 might be just about okay. But on queen h1, if queen c6 here, then knight e6. The queen's tucked away from that queen. So queen h1 is a crusher. This is now +5. +5, this position. Queen c6 was played. Knight e6. So looking at g7. Rook takes g2 was played. Check. And white could have incisively won here in this position with check and taking here to actually win the queen. Played a slightly less accurate move in the game. Played knight takes d4. It's still winning for white. Queen d5. Queen takes h7. Rook g7. It's just too strong, this position now. Queen e4. And a really brutal final blow here. Again, super accurate move in this position is played. So white's play really blowing black apart totally. Here, what would you play in this position as white if I gave you 20 seconds? So white's play here. What would you play here? Knight c6. Actually, knight c6 is good, yeah. It's not the strongest, but knight takes f5 apparently is stronger than knight c6. I think that's winning as well. So the queen is kind of overloaded. Queen takes, rook takes e7, so we're winning the queen. Queen takes f5, and black resigned here. He's also losing that rook now. If he took, then there's check, looking to win the rook. So I thought, you know, I personally, when I saw this game, I thought, okay, do I wait until Tuesday or do I do a video on it? I've just thought it was really a fun game. This is really like, you know, who cares about c4? We just, you know, g-file, pawn chain, yeah. And you know, just h4, h5. Oh, this is orange. Fanta 0. Okay, so Fanta 0, yeah. So Queen H1, beautiful move. I just thought this is a beautiful game. I hope you agree. So let's have a look at some other games. Again, from Jack Rudd. This is an earlier round now against not a Grandmaster. Let's see, against Adam Taylor. Yeah, I've covered some of his games in the channel in the past. He does seem to have an aggressive, dynamic style. So here, as white against Adam Taylor, who's only 2021 rated, he gets a nice position from the opening. The classic bind on d5. That's pretty standard stuff. So knight d5 doesn't matter about e4 here. If knight takes e4, we have bishop b6. So to win like a rook. So knight takes e4 is not recommendable here. So black played bishop takes d5, c takes, knight d4, and we have bishop d3 protecting that pawn now. Both sides castle. Black's preparing for f5. White actually now takes here, and that takes, bishop takes, and knight c2, looking at d4 to munch that, knight c5, rook a e1, d3, knight d4. Look at that lovely e6 square that black has created. That's the cost of this f5 stuff. So bishop g5, f4, bishop goes here, and then the knight goes into e6, and we have this fantastic pawn now on e6. Check. Okay, losing the b2 pawn. Queen takes. And funny enough, in this position with h7 attacked, this is actually really bad news for black, because it seems almost +5 actually. Believe it or not, the reason is if h6 is played, do you see that there's some crushing moves here? Basically, well, there's two at least. What would you play here with white if h6 was played? I'll give you 100 points for both moves. So if you were playing white here, what would you play? Any ideas? This is just a sideline of the game. Is the chat still working? Okay, not white to play. So e7 is one of them. Yeah, e7 would be good. And if takes, we just play check and then win the bishop. And if not taking, then we have check and queen f5, and this is pretty nasty. But also there's another way of playing this as well. Queen g3 with the idea of queen g6 is pretty nasty as well. This pawn is really good. So black played this rather dangerous looking g6, so that was snapped off. Queen takes, e7, so that's stopped. Check, and now we swing a rook in. Bishop h6, rook g3 threatening queen g6, and then queen takes, mating. Rook g8. Pawn's been unblocked here, so rook takes, and white now just played queen takes g8, and black resigned. So I thought that was a cute game as well from Jack Rudd. Hope you enjoyed that one too. Now from lower down the tables, An interesting little massacre occurred lower down here, so let's have a look at this cute little game. This was Ravi 2200 playing against the 2108 Hackner Oscar. White played like this, so the King's Engine attack system. We have sort of an English opening transposition. Knight c3, d5, that's taken. Knight takes, white takes, bishop takes, d4, knight d7, and white plays e4, offering a pawn, and it's actually quite dangerous. This bishop takes e4 was played, rook e1, bishop d5, d takes c, now threatens queen takes d5. Black's best here apparently is to get on with trying to castle with bishop e7 to parry queen takes d5, and this might have been okay for black, this position. If c6, we can take that, and that should be okay. So this position might be okay for black. If takes, knight takes, no disaster is imminent. So it's interesting, a little move here. Bishop e7 might keep black in the game. Black actually played knight takes c5, and this is a total disaster, this knight takes c5. Really, what does white play here? If I gave you 20 seconds starting from now. So white play in this position. Any ideas? Goes immediately to +2 this next move. Okay, someone's guessed that, yes, b4, and it's really difficult here. If we go back here, then queen takes d5. Knight b7 was played, but now we have this check. If queen d7, then white can actually take and then play check. And this is unpleasant. Bishop takes d5. Very unpleasant. This is just a very unpleasant position. Okay, probably, yeah, it might still be playable though. Let's be fair. Okay, but it's better for white. But black actually played instead of queen d7, black played king e7, just asking for it. King e7, even worse. So bishop f4. a6, rook ad1, b5. The queen just actually goes here. After f6, this is a really cruel. This is a really crushing move now, and the final move of the game actually. So white play in this position. What would you play here with white? Alright, I'm going to show you. It's a final move. Actually, there's a chat still working there. So white to play, final move of the game. No, not 95. On knight e5, let's have a quick look. Black, mind you, that's not bad either. No, even more crushing. Knight e5 is quite good. Knight g5. So we're looking at this sort of stuff. And black resigned. If f takes, then actually check. No, actually that wins the queen. And otherwise we're threatening bishop takes. So black resigned here. If takes here, well, we can play this checkmate. So black resigned there. So that was, if you're going to take a centre pawn, yeah, with black, you've got to be careful about your king. So avoid automatic recaptures. Bishop e7 would have apparently been okay for black. Okay, so Mark Hebden, a veteran grandmaster, had a very attractive game against Tim Kett. So Hebden was white, 2554, against Tim Kett, 2270. Welsh international Tim Kett, who used to actually play for Barnet's Chess Club a few years back, quite a few years back. So anyway, d5, knight e4 from Tim, bishop f4, queen b6, and looks as though this looks like standard punishment sort of thing. That's offered as a gambit. Knight takes, bishop takes. So actually, this isn't so good as bishop takes. If queen takes here, this isn't so hot. The queen is actually vulnerable still to this sort of thing. If we went for this, I don't think so. d6. You know, we don't want this. So bishop takes actually is played. Bishop takes d2. Okay, even though we're blocking that. So that's taken now. But technically, even the engine likes white in this position. The engine actually likes white with this b pawn sack. So e4. Now rook b1, offering the a2 pawn. Surely that's too dangerous to take a2. If taking on a2, bishop c3 is pretty nasty. And actually we're going to win the queen next. We just win the queen. So actually the queen goes to e5. Bishop d3, bishop d7, f4, queen c7, c4. You can see white's got a lot of things going on here. d6. And white even takes time to play h3 here to avoid any nuisance pin later. After castles, knight f3. So still can play for e5, for example. e6, white castles. e takes, opening up the bishop. So f5. This structure is prone to attack. Knight d7, f5 is played, opening up this bishop as well. Knight e5, that's taken. D takes. f6, really sick bishop going to h8. Ouch. Positionally. Bishop h6, rook e8. Keeping a nice blockade now. Bishop e4 on that e pawn. So the bishop's kind of imprisoned here. So all white needs to do here is just break down this pawn chain. Yeah. So how are we going to do that after queen d6? Well, first, is it necessary to defend f6? No, it's not, because h4 is played. If this is taken, we've got the f7 pawn underneath it. If bishop takes f6, queen f3, you know, we've got f7 here. This is hopeless. You know, if we play this, this is hopeless. So h4, we're going to be beating down on this pawn chain. b5, trying to generate some counterplay. It's too late. h5 is too dangerous. B takes. H takes g. H takes g. You know, if it takes, then f7 check. White play here. So fantastic gambit system, basically, this game of that b2 pawn. So white to play here. It looks too obvious to ask, so I'm going to just play it. Bishop takes g6. So if takes, then f7. So bishop takes f6 was played. Queen h5. Look at this. So white is threatening bishop takes f7 check now. So queen e7 was played. Bishop h7 check now. King h8. Because otherwise this is really, really horrible. Bishop f8 would win the queen actually. So king h8. Bishop e4. And it's really bad. King g8, and the final move of the game is played here. Can you spot the final move? What does white play? Actually, there's so many moves that win here. I'm not going to ask. Sorry, there's moves that win all over the place now. But so white actually played bishop g5 here. This is one way of winning. Black resigned. You know, if takes, then we just play the check, mate. So look at this game. Doesn't this highlight? This is very interesting. Bishop takes d2. This position here. Who would have thought? It's actually really quite interesting. This position to give up b2. Has anyone tried this gambit? What do you think about this? Do you think has this game convinced you this is a sound gambit? If I asked you here now, after the evidence of this massacre game, do you think, would you play this as white or not? The engine actually likes white here. Is it a poison pawn in this position, this b2 pawn? Amazing. I thought that was an impressive attacking game anyway, starting from this gambit. Whoa, sorry. Hebden against Ems was a nice grandmaster encounter. So let's have a look at Hebden against Ems. So Ems playing black 2 4 5 6. So it plays the Queen's Gambit accepted. And okay, we get this position, looks fairly standard. Castle's like here. A4, B4, E4, Rook D1. Black plays C5, and I thought when I was watching this game live, I thought Black had interesting piece activity here after knight takes C5. I thought, for example, you know, is B3 going to be useful at some point? The Queen's attack. So say Queen B6. Is Black actually threatening, you know, potentially B3? I thought. But Queen B6, there's a slight snag here. This is too dangerous, I think. This is just too dangerous. E5. And, for example, like this, Rook takes D5. Looking at E7. So, actually, Black played Knight FD7. Which is technically, it should be okay for Black. Bishop takes, Queen takes. Knight BD2, okay, covering that B3 square. A5. And look at this A5. It's got a bit of a downside, the B5 square. Knight D4, looking at that B5 square maybe sometimes. Knight E5. Queen E3. Queen E3, interesting. Rook FD8, Knight B5, going into that B5 square. But technically black is doing really quite well here from an engine perspective. Is black actually threatening anything concrete? Maybe something like knight here now. White plays h3. And this is actually played, knight cd3. And it looks good. It looks good. I thought something strange happened during the course of this game. That at this moment, I mean, look at black's pieces. They're amazing. Aren't they just optimally placed? The engine likes this a lot for black. Almost like 1.5 to black. So bishop takes d3 was played. Rook takes. Queen e2. Interesting. So tempting is rook c2 surely to pin the knight. Who can deny that? Wouldn't you as black be tempted to play rook c2 here? Why not? Yeah? In fact, I mean, there seems to be technically a stronger move. A stronger move in queen g5, apparently. More concrete, well, putting pressure still like this. Interesting. If knight f3, I think we just take here. We've got this pin. So anyway, in the game we see rook c2, which looks so tempting, but it seems to lose a little bit of the advantage significantly actually for black after f4. We see now, strangely, queen d8, so trebling on d2. Does white really want double pawns? Takes, rook takes here, rook takes, queen e3. And it's getting interesting now after rook d3. Maybe in this position, apparently bishop c6 or rook takes b2. But this doesn't look entirely without issues after knight d6, because we've got this f pawn target. So in the game we see rook d3, and we've still got this f pawn target for knight d6. So it's strange that white has survived something which looked pretty nasty to reach this position. Actually, he's got some teamwork going on to attack f7. And this happens now. Apparently, black should consider check here to maintain an advantage like this, but he didn't do that. Maybe the e pawn's slightly vulnerable. Instead, black played check, which just gives white the advantage with no downside. It seems that this knight d6 is coordinate with the queen. White just takes here and is looking forward now to knight d6 on f7. What a mess has been made of black's advantage. White is in the driving seat now. Queen d7. Okay, so queen d7 at least. Okay, if knight d6 here, this is okay for white, but maybe this is interesting as well now to try and target these pawns or get a nasty pin. So bishop c6, knight d6 takes, queen b6. So going to try and win these pawns. White's in the driving seat. He's mopping up these pawns. Takes. Queen c5. So he's got this passed pawn now. And yeah, it's a big advantage to white now. It's a total transformation from earlier. And I found that a bit strange about this game. So white's actually just got a huge advantage now. So queen g3, threatening, knight e8 on here to simplify. Actually, e5 is played now. check, queen a3 pinning, b6, b7, check. It's pretty bad news now. Check, so winning another pawn, basically, because if king h7, check here is really good. Apparently this is all pretty good for white now. So anyway, he just loses that pawn as well, and the game continued like this. Check, amusingly running into this position. I think black on purpose to get this skewer. Black resigned here. I thought this game was really strange, because if you look earlier, if we go back earlier, yeah, it just seems, you know, even if you've got a great position here, this position here requires accuracy from black. Yeah, black should play the check, apparently. So I mean, how different it is. I mean, look at this. With the queens off, with e4 weak, that's a different ball game. So this would be nice for black still. So okay, but resourceful from Hebden to just get this advantage here and target these pawns actually as well. So that was pretty good. So yeah, I thought it was an interesting game anyway. This is the last game I want to show you of Hebden again. So Hebden playing black against Simon Williams, and it's a wonderful King's Indian defense again. So King's Indian defense, fantastic. So knight f3, white castles. Sorry, classical. Bishop e3. Knight g4 is played. So Hebden playing black. Bishop g5, f6. Knight c6. White takes on e5 and plays knight d5. We see knight h6, h3, a5, and I think Simon Williams goes a bit crazy here, totally. A quite forceful idea. Engines suggest the modest just castling might be reasonable to take things easy like this. For example, white should have a small advantage positionally, but we see instead g4. G4. It looks as though, yeah, there's some sort of focal point here on f6 going on with g5. So knight f7, queen b3, knight g5. Black is already doing really well, actually. Black is doing well here. That e-pawn is also vulnerable. There's also a4 on the cards potentially. White castles queenside. Okay, so first thing, if knight takes e4, then knight takes f6, it just wins the queen, so that's to be avoided. Knight takes f3 is played. You might think, well, if knight takes f6 here, bishop takes, rook takes, bishop takes. This is actually fine, apparently, for black. This position here is fine for black. If bishop takes, we have knight d4. So that's really interesting. That this knight takes f3 is possible even. It doesn't matter about this knight takes f6. Let's just check this again. Rook takes, bishop takes. If bishop takes, knight f d4, then we can just take here. and we have this stranglehold on the d4 square. This is okay. This is great for black. Apparently, there's enough for the queen. So anyway, so knight takes f3 seems possible, and so queen takes f3 was played. But it has weakened now. Taking out that knight is strategically important. Now we play knight d4 using that lovely d4 square and shielding the queen. And what's worse is that c6 is threatening that knight to evict the knight, and it's going to look horrible. White plays a bit of a drastic idea now in this position already. Things seem to have gone slightly wrong, basically. If white tries to, say, just protect the bishop with queen e3, this isn't good. c6, here a4, and we've got a beautiful knight, and we've got this raging attack potentially with ideas like this. So Simon Williams didn't want this position. He played actually rook takes d4. After e takes, plays e5, and it looks as though there's huge pressure on f6. But black now played g5, bishop g3, f takes e5, hitting the queen, queen e4, and now there's a new trick for bishop d3 to be on h7. And there's an absolutely magnificent move played in this position defensively, which solves beautifully this h7 problem. Can you see what black played in this position if I gave you 20 seconds starting from now? So black to play, what would you play in this position? You're faced with bishop d3 now. Actually, there are other defensive moves anyway, so maybe it's not entirely essential to play this. But I thought it was cool. Black's definitely in the driving seat now. He's got a big advantage. Any ideas? What would you play? Actually, I think you can actually give up the h7 pawn with rook f7, so that's why it's. But anyway, this is the best move, one of the best moves. Rook a6. So we can just swing across bishop d3, rook h6, and we also stop h4 business. We put a sill on h4 as well. So white now took on e5, but this knight is stranded now after c6. The knight hasn't got these squares. The knight, poor knight, is stranded. All of these squares have been taken away from the knight. The knight's not going anywhere. So bishop takes g7, king takes, the knight's still stranded. After queen e5 check, there's a move here to keep the knight stranded without it doing anything. If king g8, then knight e7 brings out the knight with check. But no, black plays king f7, really cruel. So that knight hasn't got e7. It's lost here, nearly. It has to venture in. Well, white gave up the knight here. Just before we get into that, though, you might think queen takes d4 check. Doesn't help. King g8. We've got this pin on the knight. It's not doing anything. So king f7, f4, just giving up the knight. C takes. So white is a rook down now. Rook e6 after check. King g8. Bishop f5. Bishop f5. Pardon me. White resigned here. Actually, he has a rook down. And black has a strong reply, if given the chance, to play on with rook e4, using the pin, protecting d4. but white is a rook down and resigned with bishop f5. So I think there's some really beautiful games being played at the British Chess Championship, and fantastic, exciting King's Indian defence games as well. So the key players, I think, that have impressed me with these games, and we'll have some more games next week maybe. Jack Rudd, Mark Hebden, Jonathan Hawkins, really fantastic games. Hope you enjoyed this. So see you next week. Comments or questions on YouTube. Thanks very much.